They burned my orchard thinking no one would notice. The wind made sure everyone did. My orchard wasn't fancy. No marble gates. No imported palm trees. Just 40 acres of apple and cherry trees that my grandfather planted decades before the HOA even existed. The problem? My land sat upwind from a luxury HOA development, glass mansions, manicured lawns, and people who thought money replaced common sense. At HOA meetings, they called my orchard an eyesore, a fire hazard, non-compliant with community aesthetics. I reminded them of one thing every time: my orchard is outside HOA jurisdiction. They smiled politely and started planning anyway. That summer was brutal, the kind of heat that makes you question why anyone ever chose to live where the sun feels personal. Day after day, the thermometer climbed past 100 degrees F, the air so thick it felt like breathing through wet wool. The grass in the fields turned the color of old straw overnight, brittle and snapping underfoot. Even the cicadas sounded exhausted, their drone dropping to a sluggish, defeated buzz by mid-afternoon. Then the county issued the burn ban. It arrived via a single-sheet notice tacked to the bulletin board outside the feed store, stamped in red ink. Strict burn ban in effect. All open flames prohibited. No EXCPTONS. No campfires. No brush piles. No controlled burns to clear undergrowth or prepare for fall planting. Nothing. Violators faced fines starting at $500 and climbing fast if the fire escaped. Sheriff's deputies started cruising the back roads with spotters, binoculars trained on every plume of smoke, real or imagined. I didn't wait for trouble to find me. The next morning I loaded the truck with stakes, a hammer, and a stack of hand-painted signs I'd stayed up half the night lettering in black block caps on white plywood. No burning. Active orchard. County ban in effect. TRSBSSRS/ARSONISTS will be PROSSUTD. I drove the perimeter of the property, 87 acres of old apple trees, pear runs, and the newer rows of heirloom stone fruit I'd grafted myself over the last decade. Every 50 yards or so, I sank a stake deep and nailed the warning in place. The signs faced outward, toward the county road, toward the fancy subdivision that had crept up the ridge 5 years earlier, and toward the gravel access track the homeowners' association used to reach their private lake. Most people understood. A few neighbors even stopped to commiserate, wiping sweat from their brows and agreeing the ban was necessary. Better safe than sorry, they said. I nodded, though privately I thought the real danger wasn't lightning or accident, it was human arrogance. 3 days later, I smelled smoke. I was in the barn sharpening pruning shears when it hit me. Not the sweet char of mesquite or the greasy scent of a backyard grill, but something sharper, more intimate. Pine sap popping, bark splitting, the unmistakable perfume of fruitwood burning alive. My stomach dropped. I dropped the file and ran. The southern grove sits on the highest bench of the property, a gentle south-facing slope where the Gravenstein and Arkansas black apples had thrived for nearly 70 years before I bought the place. I'd nursed those trees back from neglect, cut out deadwood, limed the soil, coaxed new growth from scarred trunks. They were just starting to bear again, heavy with fruit that would ripen red and gold by September. Losing them would be like losing pages from a family Bible. I crested the rise breathing hard, lungs burning worse than the air. Flames were already moving, low, fast, greedy, crawling along the dry grass between the tree rows. They hadn't reached the trunks yet, but they were close. Too close. Smoke boiled upward in dirty gray columns, bending sideways in the afternoon breeze. And then I saw the trucks. 3 of them parked nosing along the fire break I'd cleared myself 2 springs ago. White Ford F-150s with the Ridgeview Heights HOA logo on the doors, gold cursive letters over a cartoon mountain. The same trucks that delivered mulch and enforced lawn height rules. 2 men stood beside the lead vehicle, arms folded, watching the fire like it was a 4th of July display. One held a gas can, red, 5-gallon, the spout still dripping. The other was on his phone, speaking low and urgent. I recognized them both. Dale Whitaker, HOA president, retired insurance adjuster with a permanent squint and a voice that carried even when he whispered. Beside him was Kyle Redmond, the landscape committee chair, 32, ex-frat boy, always wearing those stupid aviators even when the sun was behind clouds. They'd been after me since the day I refused to join their association. Said my unmowed orchard lowered property values. Said the fallen apples attracted rodents and undesirables. Said I should spray, prune, and generally behave like the rest of their manicured kingdom. I didn't run anymore, I walked. Straight toward them. Dale saw me first. His posture stiffened, but he didn't drop the smug little smile. Kyle turned, phone still to his ear, then quickly lowered it. "Evening, gentlemen," I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, flat, calm, the way it gets right before I lose my temper. Dale lifted both palms. "Now hold on, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I pointed at the flames licking the base of my oldest Gravenstein. "Because it looks like my orchard is on fire and you're standing here holding a gas can." Kyle shifted his weight. "We were inspecting the perimeter, saw some suspicious activity, thought we'd investigate." "Investigate," I repeated, "with gasoline." Dale cleared his throat. "Look, we've had complaints. Kids joyriding ATVs, cutting through your place, starting little fires. We figured we'd discourage that. Burn a little buffer strip, controlled, safe. Then the wind." "The wind," I said, "right." The fire had grown a tail now, racing upslope toward the main block of trees. I could hear the crackle of small branches igniting, the soft pop of apples bursting in the heat. Each sound was a gut punch. I turned my back on them and started toward the flames. There was no time for this conversation. The pump house was 200 yards downslope. The hose reel there might reach if I moved fast. I'd laid a mile of 3/4-inch line years ago for exactly this reason. Drought summers, stray sparks, stupid neighbors. Behind me, Dale called out, "You can't prove anything. This is an accident." I didn't answer. By the time I reached the pump, sweat was stinging my eyes and the smoke was thick enough to taste. I cranked the engine, primed the line, felt the hose stiffen in my hands as water surged. Then I ran back uphill, dragging the heavy coil behind me like an anchor. The fire had jumped one row. Flames ringed the trunk of a young honeycrisp I'd planted the year my father died. I aimed the nozzle and opened it full. Water hissed against orange, steam exploding upward. The heat pressed against my face like an open oven door. I fought it row by row. 10 minutes, 20, my arms shook, my shirt clung like a second skin. Behind me I heard the HOA truck start, tires spinning gravel as they retreated. Cowards. Eventually the flames shrank to smoldering patches. I walked the blackened ground, stomping out hot spots, soaking the duff until no more smoke rose. The southernmost 10 trees were gone, charred skeletons still dripping embers. Another dozen were scorched but might survive if I bobbied them through the fall. I stood there in the gathering dusk, hose still running, water pooling black around my boots. The smell of wet ash and cooked fruit hung heavy. My phone buzzed in my pocket, unknown number. I answered anyway. "Sir, this is Deputy Martinez, County Sheriff's Office. We've received multiple calls reporting a fire on your property. Units are en route. Stay where you are." I looked down at the blackened earth, at the gas can someone had conveniently left behind near the fire break. Red, 5-gallon, still leaking a thin stream onto the dirt. I laughed once, short and bitter. "Tell them to bring an arson investigator," I said, "and a camera." I hung up. In the distance, the Ridgeview Heights lights twinkled like smug little stars. They thought they'd won something today, taught the holdout a lesson, protected their precious view. They had no idea. The burn ban was still in effect. But some fires, once started, don't go out so easily. The sun had dropped behind the ridge, leaving the sky the bruised purple of a healing wound. What remained of the southern grove smoldered in patches, sending thin blue ghosts of smoke curling upward. The air tasted like charred applewood and regret. Dale Whitaker stood 50 feet from the blackened line where grass met ash, boots planted wide like he owned the dirt beneath them. They were new, tan leather, red laces, the kind of expensive hiking boots people buy to look like they hike. His khaki cargo pants were pressed, cuffs still crisp. In his left hand he held a clipboard, the metal clip catching the last of the daylight. In his right, a slim tactical flashlight he kept flicking on and off, as if signaling someone far away. I walked toward him slow, the hose still leaking in my other hand, water pooling dark around my work boots. Every step crunched over brittle char. "Evening," Dale said. Same tone he used at HOA meetings when he announced new mailbox color guidelines. I stopped 10 feet away. "You're trespassing." He lifted the clipboard like a shield. "We're doing preventative maintenance, reducing wildfire risk. You should be thanking us." I laughed short, ugly. "Thanking you for torching 12 acres of my orchard." 12? He glanced over my shoulder at the damage, then back at me. Looked like mostly underbrush to me. Dead grass, fallen limbs. We cleared a defensible space. Standard practice. "There's a county burn ban," I said. Each word came out measured like I was explaining gravity to a child. "No open flames. No exceptions. You read the signs." Dale shrugged, one shoulder higher than the other. "Our legal team reviewed the ordinance, said it applies to residential burning and recreational fires. Agricultural and wildfire mitigation activities fall under different exemptions. We're within our rights." "Your rights end at my fence line." He tapped the clipboard with his pen. "The fire break runs along the property boundary. We stayed on our side until the wind shifted. Unfortunate, but not our fault." I pointed at the red gas can still lying on its side near the access track, nozzle crusted black. "That yours?" "Never seen it before," he said without looking. "Probably kids. You know how they are, ATVs, fireworks, no respect for rules." Behind him, 2 more HOA board members had arrived in a golf cart tricked out with LED strips and a custom roof rack. They stayed seated. Watching like this was a spectator sport. I took 1 step closer. "You poured accelerant. I smelled it before I saw the flames. Pine sap doesn't burn that fast on its own." Dale's smile thinned. "You're upset. Understandable. Emotions running high. But accusations like that could be considered defamation. We have witnesses who will say we were only clearing brush." "Witnesses?" I echoed. "Kyle, myself, the 2 landscapers we hired, all prepared to sign affidavits." The distant wail of sirens cut through the dusk. 2 engines, maybe 3. Red lights flickered against the treetops as they climbed the county road. Dale checked his watch. "Fire department here. They'll confirm it was an accident, wind-driven, unpredictable, happens every dry season." I looked past him at the ruin. 12 acres. Not just brush. Not just dead grass. Rows of Gravensteins my grandfather had bud-grafted in 1952, back when the land was still called the Old Miller Place. Arkansas blacks he'd bobbied through 3 droughts and 2 freezes. The young Honeycrisp block I'd planted the spring after the funeral, when I needed something alive to remind me he was. All of it gone, reduced to skeletal trunks, bark peeled back like burned skin, fruit exploded into black husks on the ground. I felt something shift inside me, not anger exactly, but colder, sharper. "You think this ends here?" I asked quietly. Dale tilted his head. "It ends when you stop fighting progress. This valley's changing. People want safety, views, rules. You're the last holdout." The first engine rounded the bend, lights strobing across the scorched earth. Firefighters spilled out, yellow turnouts, helmets, SCBA tanks clanking. They moved fast, efficient, dragging hose lines and sizing up the hot spots I'd already knocked down. The chief, Captain Ruiz, a stocky woman with gray streaking her braid, spotted me and walked over. She knew me from the volunteer brush-clearing days. We worked the same controlled burns before the ban. She glanced at the damage, then at Dale, then back to me. You okay? Physically, I said. She nodded once sharp. We'll need your statement and theirs. She jerked her chin toward the HOA contingent. Dale stepped forward, all business now. Captain, we were conducting fuel reduction work on our side of the line. Wind gust pushed embers across. We called it in immediately. Ruiz didn't blink. You have a burn permit. We didn't need one. Mitigation exemption. She looked at the gas can, still leaking a slow dark stain into the dirt. That yours? Found it here, Dale said smoothly. Probably vandals. Ruiz made a small sound in her throat, not quite a scoff. She turned to me. Walk with me. We moved away from the others, past the smoldering rows. She kept her voice low. Whoever started this violated state law. Penal Code 451 arson. If accelerant was used and it crossed property lines, it's felony. Doesn't matter what their lawyer says. County ban is clear. No exceptions for HOAs. I nodded. They left the can, didn't even try to hide it. I see that. She looked back at Dale, who was now talking animatedly to one of her lieutenants. We'll take samples, photographs, statements. If the lab comes back positive for gasoline or diesel, this goes to the DA. No plea deal for brush clearing. For the first time that evening, I felt the knot in my chest loosen, just a fraction. Ruiz stopped, hands on her hips. You planning to press charges? I looked at the ash under my boots, at the trees that had outlived 3 generations of my family until today. Yes. Good. She touched my shoulder once brief. We'll need you at the station tomorrow. Photos, timeline, everything you remember. Don't talk to them again without a lawyer. I watched her walk back to her crew. They were mopping up now, stomping out the last glowing pockets, rolling hose. Dale and his people had retreated to the golf cart. He was on the phone, gesturing sharply. I stayed where I was until the last engine pulled away, red lights fatting down the ridge. The night settled in, cool and quiet except for the occasional pop of cooling wood. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. The next morning my phone started buzzing before dawn. Texts from neighbors. Screenshots of the HOA's private Facebook group. Tragic accident at the orchard. Wind shifted during responsible fuel management. Prayers for our neighbor. Photos posted. Close-ups of the buffer zone they'd supposedly cleared, conveniently cropped to exclude the burned trees. A GoFundMe link already live. Help Ridgeview Heights recover from wildfire scare. Support legal defense and community safety initiatives. By noon, a white envelope had been taped to my gate. Certified mail. Return address. Hargrove, Whitaker and Associates, attorneys at law. Inside, a cease and desist letter on thick cream stock. It accused me of reckless endangerment by allowing excessive combustible vegetation on my property. Claimed the fire was a foreseeable consequence of my refusal to maintain defensible space, and demanded I pay their emergency response costs or face a civil suit for damages to their members' property values. They wanted $47,000. For brush clearing. I stood in the kitchen, letter in hand, watching steam rise from the coffee I hadn't touched. Outside, the ridge was still black. Crows picked at the ash. Somewhere down the road, Dale Whitaker was probably smiling into his mirror, practicing the speech he'd give at the next board meeting. He thought he'd won the narrative. He thought wrong. Some fires leave more than ash. They leave witnesses. They leave evidence. And sometimes, if you wait long enough, they leave a chance to burn back. That night the wind changed. Not slowly, not gently, no polite whisper through the pines. At 2:17 a.m. the valley sucked in its breath and then screamed. I'd been awake anyway, couldn't sleep with the smell of wet ash still clinging to my clothes, the taste of it on my tongue. I sat on the porch in the old wicker chair my grandfather had built, coffee gone cold beside me, staring at the black scar across the southern slope. The moon was 3/4 full, bone white, throwing long shadows from the surviving trees. Every few minutes I heard a branch crack and settle deeper into the char, like the land itself was still hurting. Then the wind arrived. It started as pressure against my eardrums, a low thrum you feel more than hear. The cottonwoods along the creek bent double. Leaves tore loose and cartwheeled past the porch rail. The temperature jumped 10 degrees in seconds, hot, dry, smelling of distant desert and gasoline. Santa Ana wind, the old-timers called it, though we weren't in California. Same idea, born in the high desert, funneled through the passes, stripped of moisture, hungry. I stood up. The ridge above the HOA glowed suddenly orange, not steady, but pulsing like someone had opened a furnace door. Embers, thousands of them. The ones the firefighters thought they'd drowned, the ones Dale Whitaker had dismissed as just brush. They'd been smoldering under duff and pine needles all evening, waiting. The wind gave them wings. I watched them lift. Tiny red stars rising, arcing over the firebreak, crossing the invisible line that separated my land from theirs. They drifted like fireflies drunk on kerosene, then dove. The first one landed on the shake roof of the model home at the end of Ridgeview Circle, the one they used to sell lots, all glass and cedar, never occupied. A small bloom of flame appeared at the eaves, bright and cheerful, almost pretty. Then another ember hit the next house over. Vinyl siding doesn't burn well, but dry juniper mulch does. A hedge ignited like matchstick. Within 30 seconds, the front yard was a curtain of fire. I didn't move, didn't call anyone, just watched. One house caught. Then another. Then the hillside exploded. The groomed slope below the subdivision, berms planted with ice plant and ornamental grass, all bone dry now, went up in a single whoosh. Flame front 20 feet high, racing upslope toward the backyards. Swimming pools reflected the orange like liquid fire. Palm fronds curled black and vanished. Patio furniture melted into plastic puddles. Solar panels cracked from the heat, glass raining down like diamonds. Screams started then, thin, distant at first, then sharper as windows blew out and alarms wailed. Car horns blared in panic. Someone's motion lights snapped on, illuminating the chaos in stark white before the heat shattered the lenses. I counted 7 roofs alight before the first sirens rose from town. The wind kept pushing. Gusts clocked 60, 70 miles an hour. Embers skipped entire houses, landed 2 streets over. A cedar gazebo on the community greenbelt became a torch, sparks showering the playground equipment. Plastic slides sagged and dripped. The HOA clubhouse, white stucco, red tile roof, the place where they held potlucks and voted on fence height variances, caught next. The tile cracked like popcorn. Flames ate through the rafters and dropped burning chunks onto the parking lot. I stayed on the porch. Part of me wanted to feel something, guilt maybe, or satisfaction. Instead, I felt hollow, like the fire had burned something out of me too. Those were people's homes. Kids' bedrooms, photo albums, wedding dresses in cedar chests, all of it feeding the same orange mouth. But those same people had stood by while my grandfather's trees turned to ash. They'd liked the pretty buffer zone until the wind decided it wasn't theirs anymore. By 3:00 a.m., the entire western flank of the ridge was involved. Firebrands the size of dinner plates sailed across the valley, starting spot fires in the dry grass on my side too. I grabbed the hose again, soaked the barn roof, the house eaves, the nearest rows of surviving fruit trees. Water arced black against the sky, steam rising where it met drifting embers. My phone lit up on the porch rail, texts, calls, voicemails piling in. Neighbors. The fire department's reverse 911. Even Dale Whitaker's number, though I didn't answer. One voicemail I did play on speaker, while I dragged another hose line. "Sir, this is Captain Ruiz again. We're stretched thin. Multiple structures lost on Ridgeview. Winds driving everything toward the valley floor. If you've got defensible space, stay put and wet your roofs. If not, evacuate now. We'll get to you when we can. I looked at my own property. The burned southern grove had actually helped, created a black buffer 20 acres wide. The remaining trees were green, irrigated, spaced. I'd cleared underbrush every spring like my grandfather taught me. No mulch volcanoes around trunks. No deadwood piles. The house sat on a slight rise with gravel all around. I wasn't going anywhere. By dawn the wind dropped as suddenly as it had risen. The sky turned pink through smoke, then gold. Firefighters finally gained ground on the ridge. Air tankers made their first drops, red slurry painting long streaks across the black. The clubhouse was a smoking shell. Half the subdivision looked like a war zone. Roofs collapsed, windows blown out, cars blistered and melted. I walked the fence line at first light. Embers had crossed back onto my land in a dozen places, but the black char stopped them cold. A few small grass fires had started and died on their own. Nothing serious. Across the line, though, the access track was littered with charred debris. A child's tricycle sat melted into the asphalt. A wrought iron bench had twisted into modern art. The model home was gone, just a concrete pad and a brick chimney standing like a gravestone. I saw Dale Whitaker then. He stood in what used to be his front yard, now a moonscape of ash and warped rebar, still wearing yesterday's pressed khakis, though they were gray with soot. His designer boots were coated black. He held a phone to his ear, free hand raking through hair that wouldn't stay down anymore. His mouth moved, but no sound carried across the distance. Our eyes met. He stared for a long beat. Then he looked away, down at the ruin at his feet, at the smoking skeleton of his neighborhood. I didn't wave, didn't speak. I just turned and walked back to the house. Later that morning, the news helicopters arrived. I heard them thumping overhead while I made fresh coffee. Channel 7 called it the Ridgeview Fire, though it started on my land and finished on theirs. Reporters interviewed shocked homeowners in pajamas and blankets. One woman sobbed about losing her grandmother's piano. A man in a bathrobe said, "We did everything right. We followed the rules." I didn't go down to talk to them. By noon, the fire was 80% contained. 6 homes destroyed, 14 with major damage. No fatalities, thank God, but 3 people in the hospital with smoke inhalation and burns. The county declared a disaster area. FEMA was coming. Insurance adjusters were already circling. And somewhere in all that, Captain Ruiz found time to call me again. "Wind shift last night," she said. "Embers from your southern grove. Lab results came back fast, gasoline residue on multiple samples, including the Ken you pointed out. We've got affidavits from 2 of their own landscapers who say Whitaker ordered the burn. They're scared now, talking." I sipped coffee, watched smoke still drifting from the ridge. "So what happens next?" I asked. "DA's filing arson charges today. Multiple counts. Whitaker's lawyer is already screaming privilege and exemptions, but the judge won't buy it, not with half the subdivision gone." I nodded to myself. "Appreciate the update." A pause, "You holding up?" I looked out at the blackened slope, then at the green rose still standing behind the house. "Better than some." She gave a tired laugh. "Stay safe, we'll be in touch." I hung up. That afternoon I walked the southern grove again, what was left of it. Charred trunks still stood like sentinels. A few apples impossibly clung to branches shriveled, black but whole. I picked one, rolled it between my fingers. It felt light, hollow. I tossed it into the ash. The wind had shifted once. It would shift again. And when it did, I'd be ready. Some fires consume. Others clear the way for new growth. I wasn't sure which kind this one was yet. But I knew one thing. The next time someone talked about preventative maintenance, they'd remember the night the wind answered back. The HOA's luxury homes burned like kindling. Glass shattered in rhythmic pops, each pane giving way with the sound of a champagne bottle uncorked by force. Roofs, those fashionable cedar shakes and Spanish tiles, collapsed inward in slow, groaning cascades, sending sparks spiraling into the pre-dawn dark like dying fireworks. Sprinkler systems, the pride of every Ridgeview Heights sales brochure, sputtered and died one by one as the municipal water pressure dropped to nothing under the demand. Pipes burst from heat, pumps overheated. What was supposed to be insurance-grade protection turned into a sad drizzle on already blazing lawns. By sunrise, the tally was brutal. 4 mansions gone entirely, reduced to brick chimneys standing sentinel over blackened foundations, swimming pools boiled dry and cracked like eggshells. 2 more severely damaged, one with its entire west wing gutted, the other missing a second story that had pancaked onto the garage below. Estimated losses, according to the first insurance adjusters who arrived in company SUVs before the smoke even cleared, over $5 million. Probably closer to 7 once the art collections, wine cellars, and custom kitchens were factored in. No lives lost. Everyone got out, some in pajamas, some clutching pets and laptops, a few still wearing sleep masks pushed up on their foreheads like confused visors. But everything else, gone. Designer furniture fed the flames. Family heirlooms turned to char. Children's drawings that had been taped to refrigerators melted into the drywall. The community fountain, the one with the bronze eagle that cost $30,000 to install, now sat warped and dripping, its marble basin cracked down the middle. And guess who the fire marshal wanted to talk to? Not me. Dale Whitaker. I learned that detail around 7:15 a.m. when Captain Ruiz's cruiser rolled up my gravel drive instead of continuing down to the subdivision. She got out alone, no backup, no lights flashing. Just her still in yesterday's turnout gear, soot streaking her face like war paint. She carried 2 paper cups of coffee from the gas station on the county road. One black, one with cream and sugar. She knew my preference. "Morning," she said, handing me the black one. I took it. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too." She leaned against the porch rail, staring out at the ridge. The sun was just cresting now, turning the smoke column a violent orange pink. "We've got a problem." "More than one, I'd say." She sipped, winced at the heat. "Lab rushed the samples overnight. Gasoline premium high octane on multiple points of origin in your southern grove. Same signature as residue on the gas can. We pulled security footage from the HOA gate camera. Timestamp 3:42 p.m. yesterday. Whitaker's truck pulls up to the access track. He gets out with a red 5-gallon can, walks it over the line himself. No landscapers, no buffer zone team, just him. I let that sink in. He did it personally. Looks that way. Probably thought he could light a small, contained burn and blame it on wind or kids. Didn't count on the Santa Ana kicking up at 2 a.m. I looked down at the coffee, watched steam curl, and now half his kingdom is ash. Ruiz nodded. He's at the command post down on Ridgeview Circle. Fire marshals there, sheriff's investigators, state forestry rep. They've got him in the back of a utility van with the door open, asking questions. He's lawyered up already, some downtown firm that specializes in high-net-worth defense. But the lawyer's sweating. Bad optics when your client's the one who started the fire that burned his own neighborhood. I almost smiled, almost. What do they want from me? Statement, timeline, photos if you have any of the pre-fire condition of the grove. They're building the arson case tight. Multiple counts, felony level. If they can prove intent to damage property, even if it was just yours and it spread, he's looking at years. Plus civil suits from the homeowners. They're already talking class action against the HOA board. I set the coffee down. And me, am I a witness or a suspect? Witness, she said firmly. You fought the fire, you called it in. You preserved the gas can. If anything, you're the reason we have evidence instead of just a big question mark. I exhaled through my nose. Small comfort when my grandfather's trees are gone. She looked at me then, really looked. I know, but this isn't over. Insurance won't pay out if they prove arson by the insured party. Whitaker's personal homeowner's policy, likely voided. Same for the HOA's master policy if negligence or intentional act is proven. Those people down there are about to find out their multi-million-dollar houses weren't as protected as the brochures promised. I thought about that for a moment. About the GoFundMe that had already hit $50,000 overnight, mostly from out-of-town sympathizers who didn't know the backstory. About the news vans parked at the bottom of the ridge, reporters interviewing shell-shocked residents who kept repeating variations of, "We never thought it could happen here." "Take me down there?" I asked. Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "I want to see his face when they read him the charges." She considered it, then nodded once. "Get your boots and maybe a jacket, it's still smoky." We drove in her cruiser, windows up, AC blasting to keep the ash out. The road into Ridgeview Heights was blocked by yellow tape and a deputy. Ruiz flashed her badge and we rolled through. The destruction was worse up close. Black skeletons of houses, charred palm trunks leaning like drunk sentries, driveways buckled from heat. A Tesla sat melted into its charging pad, tires gone to liquid. The smell was everywhere, wet ash, burned plastic, the faint sweet rot of scorched fruit from my side that had drifted over. We parked near the command post, a white tent set up in what used to be the clubhouse parking lot. Dale was there just as she'd said, sitting on a folding chair outside the van, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the ground. His lawyer, a thin man in a suit that looked wildly out of place, stood beside him, phone to his ear, speaking in low, urgent tones. Dale looked up as we approached. Our eyes met again, same as the night before. This time he didn't look away. His face was gray, eyes red-rimmed. The smug squint was gone, replaced by something raw, fear maybe, or the first real taste of consequence. The fire marshal, a tall man with a clipboard and a no-nonsense voice, stepped forward. "Mr. Whitaker, we're placing you under arrest for suspicion of arson in the first degree, multiple counts. You have the right to remain silent." The words rolled out in that practice cadence. Dale didn't move, didn't protest, just sat there while they cuffed him, hands behind his back, designer boots scuffing ash as they led him to the van. His lawyer sputtered something about egregious overreach and pending civil review, but no one paid much attention. I stood 20 feet away, Ruiz at my side. Dale glanced my way, one last time before they closed the van door. I didn't nod, didn't speak. I just watched them drive him away. Later, back on my porch, the sun high now, the ridge still smoking but quieter, I thought about $5 million of regret. It wouldn't bring back the Gravensteins. It wouldn't replant the Honeycrisps. But it was something. A debt acknowledged, even if only in ashes. I picked up the phone and dialed the number Ruiz had given me for the restoration grant program. Some fires destroy. Others force a reckoning. And sometimes, in the aftermath, the ground is finally clear enough to plant something new. The county didn't waste time. By the afternoon of January 7, less than 48 hours after the last ember was stomped out, the sheriff's office, state fire marshal, and county prosecutor's arson unit converged on the ridge like ants on spilled sugar. They cordoned off the entire southern grove and the HOA access track with fresh yellow tape that snapped in the lingering wind. Evidence markers, small orange flags on wire stems, sprouted across the black earth like strange winter flowers. I met them at the gate the next morning. Captain Ruiz arrived first, followed by 2 investigators in Navy windbreakers stamped with arson bomb unit. One carried a clipboard thick with forms. The other had a tablet already open to aerial photos. A third vehicle brought a K9 handler and his accelerant detection dog, a black lab named Scout who immediately went to work, nose low, tail high. They started at the point of origin. Burn patterns don't lie. The investigators walked me through it step by step, not because they needed my permission, but because they wanted my eyes on the ground I knew better than anyone. The deepest char, the blackest, hottest burn, lay in a rough oval near the base of my oldest Gravenstein, the one my grandfather had planted the year Eisenhower was elected. V-shaped scars pointed upslope. Classic headfire pattern, flames driven by that late-night wind. But the head wasn't where the story began. The origin was downslope, just inside my fence line, in what had been a narrow strip of dry grass and fallen leaves. Multiple shallow craters, each about the size of a dinner plate, marked where liquid accelerant had pooled and ignited. The grass blades were fused into glassy beads. Soil samples would later show elevated levels of benzene and toluene, signature components of premium unleaded gasoline. Someone walked a drip line, the lead investigator. Sergeant Hale, mid-50s, calm voice that never rose, said, pointing with a gloved finger. Poured in a controlled pattern to start low and let it creep, except the wind had other plans. Scout alerted again and again. On the red gas can now bagged and tagged. On a small patch of dirt near the access track where a second pour had evidently missed. Even on the cuff of Dale Whitaker's khaki pants they'd collected from his laundry hamper during the search warrant execution that morning. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The ground was speaking loud enough. They moved on to the HOA side. The buffer zone they'd claimed to clear was laughable, barely 10 feet wide in places, littered with unburned branches they hadn't bothered to rake away. The fire hadn't respected their imaginary line. It jumped and kept jumping, fueled by the groomed but bone-dry landscaping mulch they'd spread like confetti the previous spring. By noon, the investigators had what they needed from my property. They thanked me, polite, professional, and moved down to Ridgeview Heights. That was when the real story started leaking. First came the emails. The HOA maintained a private Google Workspace domain for board business. Someone, likely one of the landscapers who'd already turned state's evidence, had screenshot and forwarded the entire chain to the sheriff's tip line. The messages were time-stamped, damning. From Dale Whitaker. To HOA Board. Subject: Fuel Reduction Plan, Urgent. Date: June 28, 2025. County ban is advisory at best for defensible space work. Our attorney confirms agricultural wildfire mitigation exemption applies. We proceed Saturday. Kyle coordinating crew. Keep this internal. No need to alarm the holdout neighbor. Reply from Kyle Redmond. Got the gas cans filled. Premium burns cleaner, less smoke, should be quick. I'll handle the pour myself if needed. Another from a board member named Patricia Lang. Dale, are we sure? The signs he put up are pretty clear, and the ban notice specifically says no EXCPTONS. Dale's reply, 20 minutes later. Pat, relax. We're protecting property values, ours and his. If he sues, we countersue for nuisance vegetation. Legal has our back. Except legal didn't. The legal team approval was a ghost. Investigators subpoenaed records from Hargrove, Whitaker, and Associates, the firm Dale had name-dropped in every meeting and letter. The managing partner, a silver-haired attorney named Victor Hargrove, no relation, produced an affidavit within hours. No such opinion had ever been requested or issued. No phone calls. No emails. No billing entries. Dale had lied, bluffed, using the firm's letterhead prestige to silence dissent. Then came the meeting notes. The HOA held an emergency board session via Zoom 2 days before the burn. The recording, auto-saved to the cloud, never deleted, captured it all. Dale presiding from his home office, the one with the view of my orchard. All in favor of proceeding with the fuel reduction burn this weekend, despite the county notice. Ayes from 5 of 7 board members, 1 abstention, Patricia Lang again, 1 absent. Kyle off camera but audible. Motion carries. I'll take care of the details. should be done by dusk Saturday. No mention of permits, no discussion of notifying the fire department, just a casual voice vote to break the law. The prosecutor didn't need much more. By the end of the week, the charges expanded. Dale Whitaker, felony arson, multiple counts, conspiracy to commit arson, filing a false instrument, the cease and desist letter citing non-existent legal approval, insurance fraud, attempting to misrepresent the fire as accidental for HOA master policy claims. Kyle Redmond, aiding and abetting, misdemeanor reckless burning. The rest of the board, civil negligence suits, were already being drafted by attorneys representing the displaced homeowners. Some were talking criminal facilitation. I stayed out of the spotlight. Reporters called. I didn't answer. A news van parked at the bottom of my drive for 2 days straight. I kept the gate locked and the blinds down. But I did go to one meeting. The county held a public briefing in the community center downtown, standing room only. Fire marshal, sheriff, prosecutor. They laid it out plainly. Origin on my land, ignition by HOA members in violation of the burn ban, spread worsened by illegal accelerants and poor defensible space practices on their side. No one shouted witch hunt. The evidence was too stark. Afterward, as people filed out, Patricia Lang approached me in the parking lot. She looked 10 years older than she had at last summer's block party, hair unstyled, eyes hollow. "I voted no," she said quietly. "I told them it was wrong. They said I was overreacting." I looked at her for a long moment. "I believe you," I said, "but belief doesn't replant trees." She nodded, tears brimming but not falling. "I'm resigning from the board, and I'm filing my own statement with the investigators. Whatever happens to Dale, he earned it." She walked away. I drove home in the dark. The ridge was quieter now. No sirens, no helicopters. Just the occasional crack of cooling rock and the soft rustle of wind through surviving branches. I stopped at the Southern Grove, got out, walked the blackened rows. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw something new, tiny green nubs pushing through ash at the base of one of the old Arkansas blacks. Rootstock, stubborn as hell, life finding a crack. I crouched, brushed ash away with my fingers. The investigation would grind on, depositions, lab reports, pretrial motions. Dale would probably plead to lesser charges. Insurance companies would claw back payouts. Lawsuits would drag for years. But here in the dirt, something was already moving. I stood up, dusted my hands. The burn had been illegal. The spread had been preventable. The regret was bottomless. But the ground was cleared. And in spring, maybe, I'd plant again. Not the same varieties, something tougher, something that remembered fire and came back anyway. Because some things don't just survive a burn. They wait for it. The lawsuit didn't take long. Not when the evidence was already stacked like cordwood, dry and ready to burn all over again. It started in civil court rather than criminal, though Dale Whitaker's felony arson trial was still months away, grinding through motions and continuances. The homeowners didn't wait. Within 3 weeks of the fire, a class action complaint landed in Superior Court. 37 plaintiffs, former residents of Ridgeview Heights, nomming the HOA board, Dale Whitaker individually, Kyle Redmond, and the entire association as defendants. They sought damages for destroyed property, relocation costs, emotional distress, and diminution of property value. Punitive damages were on the table from day one. I filed my own suit separately, smaller in scope but no less pointed. One plaintiff, me. Defendants, Ridgeview Heights Homeowners Association, Dale Whitaker and Kyle Redmond. Claims: trespass, arson, negligence, nuisance, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I asked for the fair market value of the lost trees, projected harvest revenue for the next decade adjusted for inflation and varietal premiums, cost of soil remediation, replanting expenses, and lost peace of mind. My attorney, a quiet, gray-haired litigator named Elena Vasquez who specialized in agricultural torts, told me we had a 90% chance of settlement before discovery closed. She was right. The first hearing was January 22, 2026, in Department 14 of the County Superior Court. The room smelled of old varnish and nervous sweat. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of displaced homeowners, reporters, and a handful of curious locals. I sat in the front row on the plaintiff's side, alone except for Elena beside me. Across the aisle, Dale Whitaker wore a charcoal suit that looked too big for him now, collar gaping at the neck. Kyle Redmond sat 2 seats down, eyes fixed on the carpet. The rest of the board occupied the back row, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Harlan Thorpe, late 60s, no nonsense, known for cutting through bullshit like a hot knife, called the consolidated matters first. "Counsel," he said, peering over half glasses, "I've read the pleadings, the fire marshal's report, the lab results, the HOA emails, and the Zoom recording. I've also seen the photographs of what used to be 12 acres of productive orchard and 6 luxury residences. My question is simple. Why are we here instead of in mediation?" The HOA's lead counsel, a slick partner from a Sacramento firm, stood. "Your Honor, my clients contest liability. The burn was intended as legitimate wildfire mitigation." Thorpe raised a hand. "Spare me. The criminal complaint alleges felony arson. The civil complaint alleges the same acts as the basis for punitive damages. You have a recorded vote to violate a county burn ban, accelerant use confirmed by lab, origin traced to your client's actions, and spread facilitated by their failure to maintain proper defensible space. If you want to contest liability, we can impanel a jury tomorrow, or we can talk numbers today." Silence. Elena spoke next, calm and precise. "Your Honor, my client is amenable to settlement if the defendants agree to full restitution for the destroyed orchard, appraised replacement value of 187 mature trees, projected lost revenue of approximately $420,000 over 10 years, replanting and maintenance costs estimated at $1.2 million spread over 20 years, and a permanent easement prohibiting any future mitigation activities across the property line without written consent and fire department approval." The HOA lawyer swallowed. "That's substantially more than." "Then your clients want to pay," Thorpe finished. "Tough. The insurance carriers have already denied coverage under the gross negligence and willful violation exclusions. Your master policy won't touch this. Your board members' personal umbrella policies might, but only up to their limits, and I suspect those limits are about to be tested." He leaned forward. "I'm ordering mandatory settlement conference. 1 week from today. Bring real authority, not just associates. If we don't resolve both actions, we start picking jurors the following Monday." The conference happened in a windowless room on the 3rd floor. No judge. Just a retired Superior Court judge acting as mediator, 2 pots of bad coffee, and stacks of documents that grew taller by the hour. By hour 5, the numbers started moving. The HOA agreed to pay me $2.8 million outright. $1. $1 million for tree replacement and soil work. $700,000 for lost revenue, front-loaded with interest. And $1 million into a trust fund for 20 years of professional replanting, irrigation upgrades, and maintenance. In exchange, I released all claims against the individual board members personally, provided they resigned immediately, and the association dissolved its current governance structure pending new elections. The homeowners' class got $4.3 million from the HOA's remaining reserves, and a special assessment levied against the undeveloped lots still owned by the developer. It wasn't enough to rebuild everything, but it was enough to cover mortgages, temporary housing, and some of the contents losses. Punitive damages were dropped in exchange for the board members agreeing not to contest the insurance denials or pursue contribution from me. Dale Whitaker signed last. He looked smaller than he had on the day he stood in my orchard with a clipboard, hands shaking as he initialed each page. When it was done, he didn't look at me, just stood, gathered his copies, and left without a word. The next morning's headline in the local paper read, RIDGVIWHEIGHTS, HOA settles for $7.1 million in fire aftermath. President resigns mid-hearing. Insurance carriers deny coverage citing willful misconduct. I read it on my phone while standing in what was left of the southern grove. The ground was still black in places, but green shoots were everywhere now. Apple rootstock, stubborn pear suckers, even a few wild plum volunteers that had been waiting decades for their chance. I'd already contracted with a nursery in the next county, 200 Beirut trees arriving in March. A mix, some old heritage varieties to honor the past, some fire-resistant rootstocks and cultivars for the future. Drip irrigation lines were being laid the following week. I walked the rows, counting the spots where new holes would go. The courtroom had been silent that final day. No dramatic gavel bang, no tearful apologies. Just papers passed, signatures scrawled, and people leaving through different doors. But the silence wasn't empty. It carried weight, the weight of consequences finally landing, of arrogance reduced to line items on a settlement sheet. Dale Whitaker had wanted control, control of the view, control of the narrative, control of the land next door. He ended up with none of it. The HOA that once sent me violation notices for unsightly fallen fruit now existed only on paper, its treasury gutted, its board disbanded. And me. I had money, yes, enough to rebuild better than before. But more than that, I had quiet. The kind that comes after a long, loud argument finally ends. I crouched beside one of the strongest root sprouts, an Arkansas black, same as the old tree that had stood there since 1952. I brushed dirt from its first true leaves. "You're going to be taller than he ever was," I said aloud. The wind answered, soft this time, cool, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant rain. No embers. No accelerant. Just promise. I stood up, dusted my hands, and walked back to the house. Some silences are punishment. Others are peace. This one felt like both. Today, my orchard is growing again. New trees. Stronger irrigation. A permanent conservation easement protecting it forever. The HOA. Still there. Still quiet. And every spring when my trees bloom, the wind carries the scent downhill. A reminder. You don't play with fire, especially when it's not your land.